Welcome to season 2 of the Human Design Profiles, an entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Chantel, a 1-3 manifesting generator, small business strategist, and the author of the Aligned Action series for solo entrepreneurs. Thanks for joining us today on the show, which is all an active learning experiment on how we experience being entrepreneurs as individuals through our human design profiles. Each episode profiles a human design enthusiast / business owner who's here to share about their introspection, how their personal profile lines have influenced their journey, how they use what they know about their profile to set intentions, and what this looks like for them personally in the implementation phase with the decisions that they make on a daily basis as business owners. Today, I'm connecting with Vaness, a shamanic practitioner, producer, and author. She explores evolved body care by identifying afflictions in the body's energy field that may lead to illness or dis-ease. As a childhood cancer survivor with a history in educational and motivational speaking, Vaness is known for heartfelt, impactful insights in the fields of human design, feng shui, and the shamanic arts. This conversation is extra special for me because Vaness was my first ever human design coach 5 years ago. So I know for a fact that you'll find this conversation illuminating. Have a listen while today's guest, Vaness, a 6'2", shares her story while you read between the lines. So Vaness, you have a very comprehensive understanding of the human design system as a whole. When do you find yourself reaching to the profile lines in particular, either for guidance or to explain something?
Great question. Profile is really, really significant because a lot of people can relate to it right away, which I think is a very important piece when you approach a study like human design. We very much narcissistically want to understand about ourselves, then maybe we'll branch out and understand our family members. But when we look at human design, it's very complicated. And we tend to look at your design type, and there's all this information around that. But the profile gives you a look into kind of two sides to you, which I think is very cool. For example, the 6-2 has a conscious 6 and an unconscious 2, meaning you're a conscious role model, and then the unconscious hermit. For me, when I found that out, it was very illuminating because I knew I could put myself out there and kind of be seen and perceived. Oh, did I need to pull away and hermit sometimes? And so I found learning that piece of my human design just made me entertain the idea that, oh, everyone on the playing field of life is a character. What character are they? And to look at each other through that lens, I find we give each other more space to be how we are, to be who we are, such as being a 1-3. We know that somebody who's an investigating martyr has to really get into specific things that they're interested in. It doesn't matter what's going on everywhere else. And part of their process to dig in and understand things is to bump into things. So they have to kind of put themselves out there. And I remember when we worked together, you were always networking and traveling across Canada and going to events, and you were always meeting people. This helped you in your business. But really what I was seeing is bumping into people all the time, and who am I going to resonate and make a connection with? So I think it's a very beginner-friendly piece of human design, but it doesn't go away even when you're exploring the depths. It always comes back to, well, all of this information is filtered on an investigating martyr, on a hermit opportunist, on a role model hermit. So it's a really, really important piece, in my opinion.
I agree with you so much about that accessibility. It tends to be the second thing people find out about themselves or remember about themselves. When someone first learns human design, they're like, oh, I'm a generator. Oh, I'm a reflector. And then the very next thing that they remember about it from the whole complicated chart is I'm a 4-6 or whatever it is, right?
They can butcher it though, I
Oh,
love
for
this
sure.
part because you'll see I'm a 6-4. I think I saw
Or
once
a
I'm
3-1.
1-7. I was like, oh, no, 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 no,
that's
no. I loved it. I
that's
loved it.
special.
But I was like, I don't even know what they might be. They might be trying to, yeah. There's 12 profiles and they're arranged in a certain way. The 1-3, the 1-4, the 2-4, the 2-5, the 3-5, the 3-6, the 4-6, the 4-1, out of order there. 5-2, 5-1, 6-2, 6-3. So it is actually a pattern. It's not all those numbers that go all together. It does go in that kind of sequence like that. And it's just depicting these 12 potential characters we could each be.
In season 1, I did go through them in order. So if you're
Love that.
looking for in order, of course, line 1, I had to have a foundation of all of them in order, right? I would have loved to keep up with that in sequence, but I actually have been having a hard time finding certain guests to represent certain profiles, which
Yeah, well,
may or
the
may
rare
not
ones.
surprise
Well,
you.
there are rare profiles, so that makes sense. Finding a 4-1 could be challenging. A 2-5 could be challenging.
It
These
sure
ones that are
is.
less common. Yeah.
Yep. Can you explain for us why some of them are more common than others?
Oh, good question. How would I even say this? Some are more common than others, more popular, you could say. There's more of us on the planet, and some are just rare. And it just has to do with what's defined when we were born. But it's a bunch of features in the chart. I don't think I can actually give a succinct answer as to why some are rare. And I don't want to say something and be wrong. I was about to go into a deep dive on the incarnation cross, but I don't think it's necessary. The 1-3 is common. You'll know which are common because you see them out and about. Ones that are juxtaposition, that you're not a left angle cross or a right angle cross, that's a bit more rare. That's going to be the 4-1. And there's just not as many configurations and options that will make you into something like that. So it's rare, but it's also rare to have all your centers defined. There's lots of different rarity in the chart. It's rare to have your head center defined. Most people don't. Chantel does. So do I. We connect on that mental pressure.
Yeah, I have been noticing too. I don't know if it's that there's more entrepreneurs who have certain profiles, or if there's just more of a willingness from certain profiles to engage and to put themselves forward as wanting to be on the show. But I could easily have this show be just interviewing 1-3s, 3-5s, 5-1s, and 6-2.
Honestly, would be a totally okay show because you would reach so many people. There's not going to be necessarily as many listeners, if you want to talk about strategic, as there would be, with if you're deviating into the more rare ones. For example, the 2-5, the 5-2, those are a little bit uncommon. Although there's a bunch of 5-2s I think we can find as entrepreneurs in the field. A bunch come to mind anyway to me, but not so much. And the 4-1, I couldn't call one up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 4-1 has been a particular struggle, especially in season 2. As we're recording, I still haven't found one for this season. But
that's a cute story. Like, that's just a story. Where are you? Are you out there?
Yeah.
4-1, are you listening? Come to me.
I don't know if this is my guilt motivation or what, but I would feel so crushed if someone with that profile came to the show and couldn't find any episode with someone who had the same profile as them. And so I'm always seeking in that way.
I mean, I'm still looking for an ego projector to watch, because I like to watch all the characters and different features. And as an ego manifester, I'm the rarest of the manifestor breeds. So people can have a hard time finding ego manifestors. Not me, because they come look for me because we're all the same. So we all connect together. But typically, if manifestors are 9% of the population, 5% of that 9% are ego manifestors. So and that's because the way energy centers could be defined, it's not as common to have that configuration. Again, without getting too annoyingly, unnecessarily complex. Anyway, 4-1, where are you? Come to the show.
So you've mentioned character a few times now. And one of the ways that you express that character element, and one of the ways that you share your perspective as a 6th line, is through your YouTube series On the Roof. What I love about On the Roof is that it feels like TV I actually care about, which never happens because I do not care about TV. But you make me care about, I care about the characters because it's you and people you know and love, but I also care about the characters because you make me care about them through the human design elements that pop up above their heads as they interact. Yeah. For me, that's such a fun format. It's very resonant, very memorable. I went to a panel last week on Canadian architecture because, I just like to dabble. And
love that.
There were 3 people on stage, and my brain started popping up little guesses about their designs as they were interacting. And I realized how On the Roof inspired that. Now a little bit of it lives in my heart, lives in my brain.
Oh my God. This is so tender. I can't handle this. I'm like, this is so nice. Thank you. High compliment.
So can you describe the show for listeners? People who love this show would love that show. And in particular, can you talk about how you used the pop-up elements to express your leadership and to teach about human design?
Sure. This is great timing because we have a new season coming out. I'd like to do about 1 a year, and it's a very slow show, but it has turned into sort of like a photo album. I'm learning. I love it more and more each year because I watch my family change. We always have a new set. I like that. The concept of On the Roof is a YouTube series showing a family and showing their human design in action. So it's 2 6-2s who are in love. They sit together and they just chat about their life. And as they're chatting, you see generator pops up or he's making these sounds. And every component of their design, not every component, but funny components of their design as they're just being themselves. I don't know why I'm talking about it in 3rd person, but I'm just in my producer mode, I guess. We'll point out features. We'll put up their energy centers, and it's comedy. And that's very intentional. The reason for that is Chantal, we share this background. We're both teachers. I think you taught in high school. I taught in colleges and universities. I was teaching adults, which is definitely different than what you were doing. I don't claim to have any relation to that because that's a very challenging job. And I felt that the best way to learn was when the experience was enjoyable. If you teach through comedy or make them laugh, statistically speaking, they will digest the information more easily and be able to recall it. So I thought, how might I be able to create something that is edutainment? It's education, it's educational and it's entertaining. And my husband and I started doing this show during the pandemic. And as we continued doing it, my son really wanted to get involved. And it took me a while because I was like, I don't want to put my kid on the internet. And then there was this moment of, if you don't allow your kids to explore what they want to explore, they're going to do it anyway without letting you know. They're going to do it in secret. It's perhaps not as safe. So it wasn't surprising to me that my kid wanted to get involved, wanted to have his own kind of YouTube and everything, because his parents are producers. He's around it. He's exposed to it. It made sense to me, but it took me a long time to figure out, how do I get him in there? Anyway, we introduced him onto the show. He's a 2/4 manifesting generator. And we introduced my mom. She's a 1/3 emotional generator. And we just had fun showing different characters pop on. The pop-up elements are really just words that come on the screen or pictures of energy centers. As these people are doing this kind of funny talk show format, they just kind of pop up. There's lots of sound effects just to make it funny and silly. It's a silly, family-friendly kind of show. And each episode is short. They're maybe like 10 to 15 minutes. I wanted people to be able to like binge them. And they do. It's neat to go look at analytics where somebody will find our show and then you'll see they go and they do the whole series. And now there's 3 seasons. So there's content to go through. It was a funny thing that started in the pandemic. And I don't know, people really like it. And I've thought about, how could I give more energy to this? But it's challenging. I do everything in that show. My husband helps me with the SFX and the comedy. But the filming, the coordinating, the planning, the editing, the video, sound, it's a lot. And I'm just learning now as an entrepreneur. I kind of thought I was more of an influencer, and I'm learning, no, you're a content creator, because I do so much of the labor still. The Instagram is my voice, the blog is my voice, YouTube, it's all, there's not really a huge team behind that, although I do have a manager. She helps me more with my variable content that I do when I'm really exploring energetic illness with people. So I don't necessarily have someone help me with the production. So I learned through this process, I'm not an influencer, I'm a content creator.
Yeah. Tara McMullen just wrote an essay about this, and she uses the term media maker. And I wonder if you would identify with that too.
I love it. I obviously love it. Yeah, I obviously love that. I thought I was an influencer. And I was like, oh no, I'm very comfortable behind the scenes. Like I'm very comfortable producing. Like I like to find the stars, pluck them out of the field. It's very 6-2 to me. Looking out at the playing field of life, gosh, that person's really special. And then kind of initiating as the manifestor, approaching them, maybe making some kind of show or something with them. It's not always me in the spotlight. I like to be behind the spotlight, if that makes sense, like wielding where the spotlight will shine. But I'm learning that there is value in bringing your own light that you bring and showing up and shining yourself and showing others that that's possible and leading by example in that way, I think. So that's been challenging for me as a hermit. Although I'm very comfortable in the spotlight, I do a lot of public speaking and was a performer, so I'm comfortable on the stage. But as I've gotten older, to be perceived and to then see that there is a sea of, let's say, commentary or articles written about you, that was very challenging for me to deal with at first. When I became a 6th line and went on the roof and started creating things and then would find people anonymously writing articles about me, and I would find it on the internet when I'm looking for something, I was so disturbed by that. Like it just made me feel so uncomfortable to be perceived in that way, and specifically to not be in control of the perception how the other is perceiving you. And then, people would have opinions about your opinions or your expression. And I had to kind of get to a place of learning, well, what is necessary to tune out? And where do I need to dial up the volume on certain things? And there was a lot of trial and error in there. And I would say I'm only reaching a place now, and I'm 35, so I've been on the roof for a few years now. I'm feeling a bit more comfortable. But it took me time to kind of get to that place. And only now am I feeling like it's okay to perceive me again, but I can still really retreat. And my community around me sort of embraces that. And I feel they give me a lot of permission to do that, which I didn't have in my life before I entered the human design space. And so I've kind of been saying in this season of life, I find the human design space to be an incredibly healing space, because the community that comes in there as they do their own learning, they are willing to see other people. They're willing to see each other another way, including themselves. And so I'm very devotional to the human design space because of that healing that it's facilitated for me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a perfect segue into my next question. I wanted to ask you about how both hermiting and leadership look different for you from your first to your second life phases. Also curious about how hermiting changes for you just based on life circumstances, like when your child is home, like for say spring break, or when he's at school, or when you're immersed in a production project versus something else that you're doing.
As the sixth line, you go through 3 life phases from 0 to 30 before you hit that Saturn return. Your sixth line is operating more like a 3. So I was really operating more like a 3 too, bumping into things, had this resiliency. When I look back, I don't connect or resonate so much with my hermit side because I was not aware of it. Like this was the unconscious part of me. And I can see that I likely needed to pull away, or even in like family gatherings, I would often be like, this is too much. And I'd want to pull away, and the family would try and call me out and I'd get all mad, a little angry little kid. And then when I became a sixth line, I definitely lost a lot of that resiliency, but I became more aware of this need to retreat and pull away. Otherwise, I will erupt. And I don't want to erupt. I don't want to explode. So what do I need to do to be aware of myself, perhaps when I'm feeling dysregulated? And a really great teacher, I'm very lucky to have this in my life. My husband is also a 6-2. And so just by being able to observe him helped me understand myself more, because it's very challenging to observe yourself. That's why it's so important who we choose to surround ourselves with in life, because they're reflecting things that we can perceive back and understand ourselves. So because I had this 6-2 partner and I really recognized his big need to pull away, it helped me see that in myself. I then gave birth to a 2-4. And so we have this house of hermits. And I really find for my husband and I as the 6-2s, it's our bodies that need to retreat and go into the bedroom. I can be on my phone connecting with a friend, boxering, doing whatever, because my consciousness is stimulated in that way. But my body is like, I'm alone. Okay. My son, as the 2-4, is the exact opposite. He wants me to be laying with him, but he wants to be doing his own thing, like playing a game, coloring, watching YouTube, doesn't want to be associated with me, but wants me around. I'm like, I can't, mom can't have that. So we try and find the balance in that. But what I notice is his consciousness needs to pull away, not his body. His mind needs to be kind of focused on something else. So that's been a good teacher as well. But a whole other side of the hermit are these talents and skills. And somebody recently said to me, she's like, when I perceive you, you're very considerate and compassionate and highly skilled. I was like, highly skilled? Like, what kind of skills could she possibly be thinking? And so there's this element of like a lack of awareness of self, because things are so natural for the hermit because they're just weird doing their thing. They don't realize that there's something perhaps special there, that maybe they have a heightened skill. And it can sometimes be difficult to express or translate those skills to other people. I really see that in myself, and I really see that in my husband, and I really see that in my kid. So having them around as teachers has been so crucial, because once you become a sixth line, you learn through the other. So observing, it's like you collect subjects in your life. And I'm watching the 1-3, and I'm watching the 2-4, and I'm watching all these characters live their life, and I'm learning through them. The sixth line has that transpersonal quality where it can perceive others and take something from it that it needs for itself. Whereas let's say the 1-3, the first line, is very much, I'm interested in understanding this because I don't want to be afraid. Let me know how this works. They're digging down. The 6 is doing something else. The 6 wants to understand why the 1 is doing that. The 6 wants to understand why the 2 is doing what they're doing. So the 6 with the 2 is fun. It's like, okay, people are watching you and you've got some special talents, and you're going to need to use those talents in your own creative way. And that will make you an example of something, but you might not know what those talents are. Good luck. So it's been really helpful to have people around me pluck out my quote unquote skills that they find to be valuable or helpful. But it has been challenging because sometimes as the second line and as an ego, it's on an ego manifestor aura too. I would get called into things I didn't actually want to do, but it needed to be done and no one else was stepping up. So then I would go and do it and then eventually get resentful and bitter about what was happening because I didn't actually want to do it, but I had the skills or I was a natural. But it's like, I only got those skills because nobody else was doing it and it still needed to be done. It doesn't mean I want to do it. I find that's something that can follow the second line sometimes. And so we get resentful and nervous when people try and call us out or recognize our skills because it might be a skill that we acquired through questionable means. Like we didn't actually necessarily want to do that, but maybe had to. And because we're a natural, we're always going to figure it out. We're always going to figure out how to execute it. So that's kind of challenging.
I've talked with a few 5 lines about projection fields on here. And what you were just describing about the 2-line natural and having things imposed on you feels like similar to that and yet different.
Yes.
Can you give me your insight into the differences between those two things? Like how a 5-line projection is different than a 2-line natural in terms of other people's expectations?
Well, they both have projection fields. They're both the middle of their trigram. So they're both the most powerful. And so think about the 5-2 and the 2-5, they have these double projection fields. Well, can anyone really see them? I think we can, but they often feel not seen. And in my experience, the second line is treated softer, I would say, than the 5th line. There is this innocence that people see in the second line. Like they're kind of, it's like they're clueless. They don't see it. They don't know. And they're being usually called out for talents, for physical abilities, if that makes sense. When we look at the 5, it's more forms, and they're usually being called out for something that they have expressed or an opinion. This is what I mean about the formlessness. It's not so much about their talents and abilities per se. And there is something about the 5th line that gets treated more violently, unnecessarily so, because we put them up on this pedestal and they've got to be everything. And then we're ready to kind of tear them down. From the 6th line perspective around that, I feel that the 6th line can be put up on a pedestal as well. And there is incredible compassion in the 6 lines in my life when we look at the 5th lines. The 6 lines are usually obsessed with 5th lines. Like we're like listen to them. But then the 5th line, will just get punished unnecessarily. And it's because they are rubbing up against and activating something in the other. Their other isn't really even seeing them, but whatever they're saying, it's triggering something in the person. And we're not so aware collectively yet that we can't recognize they're just activating something in me that I'm ready to evaluate. Instead, we flip it and blame them for something. And they get that. They receive a lot of that. Now, they can also be extremely successful because there's this profound leadership there, whether you're a 3-5, whether you're a 5-2, it doesn't matter where the 5 shows up. And it doesn't matter where the 2 shows up either. These are both things that people will see things in the other and it will activate something within them. And sometimes that activation that they're feeling dehumanizes the person that they're looking at because they can't see past the thing that's triggering them. And they, as a culture, we're still learning not to blame each other, not to blame our parents for how we are, or blame our grandparents for how our parents are. And we're just learning how to take personal accountability in that way. And I think the 5th line sometimes has a challenging role, but there are 5-1s who are like incredibly famous and adored. There's 3-5s. Look at Kim Kardashian, for example. She has so many projections around her, and yet she's that resilient 3-5 who can figure out anything. She's like, yeah, I'll try it. Sure, I'll try it. She's such an amazing example of the 3-5's potential. And also, she's adored, and also she's not adored. And so she, as the human, has to contend with that experience and likely create parameters for the projection field. So I think the 5th line and the 2nd line show us that we don't always see each other, but we look at each other as mirrors sometimes. And something about the 5th line, the 2nd line, I feel like they kind of live with a mirror. The 2nd line, it's like they're holding a mirror facing them. Look at me, everybody, something like that. And the 5 is the mirrors facing outwards. Like, look at you. But they're both holding mirrors, and it just kind of creates this little reflection.
I love that visual at the end. That's where my mind was going, but until you did the visual, it didn't all click into place. So
outer vision loves that.
That's right. I really did.
Double outer vision over here. Yeah.
As a manifestor, you're always doing things that are new.
Mm.
What is the new passion project that you're exploring right now? And how would you say you're experiencing that project from your role model hermit lens?
So my story kind of begins around a lot of illness. Growing up, my father passed away from skin cancer before I was even a tween. And then a few years later, I was diagnosed with my own cancer. They were completely unrelated. And this sort of put me in a world that was very dominated by cancer. And I spent a lot of time living in the hospital and surrounded by other kids who had cancer. And then as I entered remission, I became a spokesperson for the Canadian Cancer Society because they didn't come across a lot of young people who were savvy speakers and who could talk about something so challenging to a public audience. So it really kind of infiltrated the background of my life. When I went on the roof, also personal view in my variable. So I see the world kind of through my experiences, if that makes sense. And I started to see a lot of body graphs that were cancer patients. And I started to recognize patterns that people's cancer would exhibit based on their body graphs. And that pattern was cancer seemed to move through the openness in the chart where there were open centers or open gates, right down to the point where I could predict where people's tumor development was spreading. That kind of freaked me out a little bit. And obviously that's like kind of like a big statement. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be looking then, what else am I seeing? Because that's weird. Like there's nothing to prove there, but it's if you can say to enough people, look at if you know someone who's been unwell and has had cancer, let's stay on that topic, look at their body graph and look physically where their tumors were located, and you will see something strange. What do we not know? What are we not understanding? That kind of set a drive in. And my human design studies went very deep into variable, which is looking at the depths of your design and how are you designed to nourish yourself? What spaces, people, environments do you resonate to? How does your mind work? And I was looking at this because I wanted to understand how to nourish the body. If the body is designed to heal, why is it getting sick? And in the topic of cancer, cancer is a confused cell. The cell inside the body doesn't attack the cancer because it's, oh, this looks like me, but it's different. But what is this? There's confusion. And when we look at the determination variable, the environment variable, these are depths in your design on how to take care of your body. We can see that if you don't have what you need and you're not eating in the way that you're designed to be eating, which is extremely evolved. We eat more than food. We consume content all the time, for example. It's a form of eating. We weren't eating properly. We become malnourished and we could develop chronic symptoms in our body, which other medical fields are kind of talking about now. And it gets very interesting with human design because it's almost like it's showing you an X-ray and you can depict potentials for illness and healing. So I don't think I would have seen things this way if I didn't have the background of being sick, because I wouldn't have had all these people, because I tell my story a lot. And so people are like, oh my gosh, I'm a cancer patient. I want to go work with her. Look at my design. What do you see? And then you see something profound that rattles them and they're like, oh my gosh. And so I started to look at other diseases or illnesses or just manifestations of unwellness, things like alopecia or MS. And I started writing about this on my newsletter, just pointing things out. Look how weird this is. All these people have MS. Look at what's the same in their chart. Why are they all undefined head, undefined heart, undefined solar plexus? And one center is totally open. What's going on there? And as I continued pointing things out, other people were seeing it as well. And so now I'm kind of in this place in my life where I'm gathering and accumulating data on the roof, I think, to later prove a big point about something. As an ego manifester with a defined head, what point do I want to make and what point do I want to prove, And that point, I think at this time, is that cancer is totally preventative and it grows out of our relationships with each other. And when we are not in healthy relationships, our mom is always in our ear scolding us, or our partner discourages us, or our friend circle is toxic, whatever the case may be, we are surrounded by that. We're ingesting that. And then it's as if our openness in our chart wants to be what the other wants us. And it's like it tries to define that center in an unnatural way, and it becomes a tumor to fill that kind of space. And I think that if we're talking about cancer specifically, chemotherapy can, of course, help treat the cancer if you have it, but it's incredibly violent. It's an incredibly traumatic experience that has so many long-term symptoms after the fact. And our chemotherapy development has come a long way, and it's still a poison you're putting in the body to exacerbate the cells. What if we didn't have to do that because we were never getting sick in the first place, because we had such a deep understanding of our bodies that we could immediately recognize when we didn't resonate with something? We had understanding of how to nourish ourselves. But without going on too long here, that change happens with parenting. Our parents use what worked for them and they put it on us. They even use things that didn't work for them and they put it on us, because if it worked for me, it worked for you, or this is how we've always done it, rather than understanding the individuality of the child, which is what human design is. Understand the uniqueness of the individual and what they need, because it's likely not what you need. And for some people, I'm someone who's very sound sensitive, but you're not. So sounds might not dysregulate you the way they do me. So to you, it's like, oh, who cares about sound, whatever. But it's like, but for me, in my world, it does matter. So just recognizing that there's differences in the other, especially in your kids, and just learning about that rather than putting our own onto them is what will exacerbate illness in our lifetime, because we're not confusing ourselves by trying to be like each other. So there's so much information out in the world on how to take care of ourselves, but how do we learn how to filter through it to recognize what actually applies to us? Because not everything applies to us. So at this point in my life, I have an online wellness club where I share all my audio resources for the variable depths, all the ways people are designed to eat, what their senses are. So it's a massive 48 audio collection for people to just reference their depths and the depths of people in their life. And then I have a private podcast there where I kind of talk about these things and also do shamanic healing there. So I have something called the Frequency Bar, where I design these shamanic soundtracks that help you go in to the deep programming that you have and sort of reimagine it and stir up the energy field to facilitate some really cathartic healing. Because I'm at this space where it's like, you can identify illness in the body or potentials for illness, but then what do you do? And so much of these illnesses are from a lack of awareness. So it's almost like, how do you build awareness while also releasing and processing and letting go of all those things that happened to you? They're not held and trapped in the body anymore. So I find myself in a really weird territory where I'm like this journalist who went out and was just asking questions about health because they were sick. And I keep getting into more alternative studies. And I keep seeing these things that point to the same thing, which is we don't get sick from living near power lines or even eating overly processed foods, because some of us can totally handle that and it's fine. But what is going on in the most important relationships in our life and the healthy and unhealthy contracts we have there, I think that is where illness actually sets in. But I don't know how you prove that at this point. You know what I mean? So it's really, I'm at a phase of just kind of writing about it, gathering data, and trying to make a living creatively while still being able to pursue my interests in it.
Wow. I'm always so impressed by you.
6 lines, eh? Like, here's my story. I'm going to talk for an hour, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for listening.
I am always honored to listen. I think that everyone who finds you through whatever means, if like their first initiation is through this podcast, hearing you speak is always so impactful.
Thank
I'm
you.
grateful to be able to witness that and share that. It's fascinating how essentially what you're talking about is almost like a diet of our relationships, a diet of our environment, right? You had this evolution where you talked about feng shui, like creating physical spaces that nourish us, right?
Yes.
But then now you're also talking about how relationships nourish us. There's that nourishing theme through different angles, like you said, through different practices.
I would love to talk about feng shui for a minute, actually, because I studied feng shui before human design, because my life was, there's a lot going on. And as soon as I was in remission, I then went straight into college and had like roommates. And oh my God, that was a lot. Living with people was a lot. So being able to arrange my space so it held me, I think was part of my hermit tendencies coming out. But I started studying feng shui with Lillian Tu, who I highly recommend. She's really great at modernizing classic teachings in feng shui. She's exclusively who I study with, even still. Feng shui is an ancient study, like 3,000 years old. Human design is like 30 years old, So just for context, but they both reference the I Ching. And because when I got into human design, there was a lot of overlap I was seeing from feng shui, hardscape, landscape environments, the arrangement of the flow of energy in a space. And so I started to create a series on my blog that's called HD at Home that shows you, based on what your environment is, whether you're caves, markets, kitchens, mountains, valleys, or shores, how might you arrange your space using feng shui principles, but doing so through the filter of what your environment is. And then I take you through room by room in your home. And the reason for that series was some people really need a big radical life change, like they need a divorce or a separation, but they aren't ready to do that. Or they need to break up with a friend who's always been there, but they're not ready to do that. Or they really should quit their job. It's unhealthy, but they're not ready to do that. Working with your home environment can be one of the most nurturing things to do. Just to recognize, just by rearranging this space and the flow of energy suits me better. Wow, I feel different here. I feel better. And it was a way for people to very practically experiment with the depths of their design to get results. And as I continued doing that, it turned into, egotistically, I was like, try this, try that. I missed that people were like, I'm already doing that. So it turned into, recognize how many of these things you're already doing. Look how smart your body is. Okay, your kitchens, try and put your desk in the middle of the room. Give yourself a creative hub. What's the heart of the home in your house? How can you really make that the gathering space? And people were like, I am doing that. Oh my gosh. And it just created this, I think, empowerment and encouragement that I think can stimulate health. I think that can be like, yes, like they believe in themselves, they have this confidence, and they want to then go and maybe they have some bravery now in having those hard conversations in some of those relationships that they're in. So a lot of people, I think, live a life and they've designed a life with elements they've outgrown and they hang on to those. But we're not all adept at recognizing when it's time to move away from a toxic relationship. I don't know if you can relate to this at all or you have anything to share, but relationships can kind of suck us dry of our energy when they're not nourishing. And they can also make us bloom when they're supportive and aligned. So I toss this back to you as the 1-3. Do you have any examples in your own life when you could recognize the relationship there, the bond needed to break? Otherwise, I was wilting in a way.
Yes, over and over again. I have so many examples to share. A very strong one is as a teenager, like I consistently had a sore stomach. I was like Chudi in The Good Place. Like I had a sore stomach all the time. It was a central personality aspect. And yes, I'm open solar plexus.
Oh, you see, I'm looking at your design right away. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just in an environment where I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. It wasn't safe to express emotions. It wasn't something that was ever discussed, that we even had emotions. And it was this avoidance of feeling. I think for me, that manifested in my body in this like inner turmoil, right? Where I was really lost. And I moved away after high school. I went to university elsewhere. And even like I had allergies that I didn't have anymore out of nowhere. And I'm like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And luckily I drew the link myself pretty easily. This is years before I found out about human design. But I realized, okay, well, maybe it wasn't like milk that you were allergic to. Maybe it was that environment that you were allergic to that didn't work. It felt wrong. And, I didn't shift necessarily right away to the environment that was correct for me, but I noticed an improvement and I was at least moving in the right direction. And so I was grateful to have that, especially as a manifesting generator with sacral authority, that like a little bit of healing with the gut and that connection that really helped me understand my sacral response. Again, all this language I'm applying later, revisionist history, because I didn't know about human design at the time, but starting to listen to like quite literally my stomach of like, does this feel right for me or does this not feel right for me? And I had a long-term relationship, like late 20s, early 30s, that was completely incorrect. Into the relationship from the wrong way. It was like negative at every turn. And I started to wonder to myself, can anything good from
Mm.
something that started so badly? Eventually and painfully, and like years of back and forth and whatever along the way, like, no, it could not. But it took me a long time of thinking that I was locked into this and that I was stuck in this mode, that like I had chosen this, and this was now what I had to experience as a result. And that too, that created a lot of unease in my body. This time it wasn't in the same place, it was manifesting between my shoulder blades. And it was like this like grief and guilt and just not fun feelings residing there and creating chronic back pain. For years I was like, oh, I have a bad back.
Yeah. Stories
And
we tell ourselves.
yeah, eventually I finally exited that. It wasn't until being in the current relationship that I'm in, and you really witnessed the beginning of that. We were coaching together right around that
Yeah.
time, where I started to feel the opposite. I started to feel safety. Those things kind of dissolved in my body. That pain largely went away. It doesn't really exist for me anymore. And I'm deeply held in a different way than I ever
Yeah.
have been in relationship. And so now I'm in this stage where it's like, okay, I'm exploring what I'm possibility view, what possibilities exist now that I have this foundation, line one, of safety, right?
That's a very innocent perspective. Yeah. I want to use a human design filter, if I may. First, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Louise Hay's work or
Yep.
German New Medicine. This is
Mhm.
something that I reference all the time. I was hearing things with what you're speaking about.
Mhm.
There is something with generators, manifesting generators, emotional or pure authority, sacral authority, excuse me. They get back issues. They get back issues when they're not listening to authority. And if you think about the alignment and, and the biological correlation for some of these centers, it's just something's interesting there. So I do want to
Mhm.
say I studied Louise Hay and German New Medicine in braid with human design. Your kitchen's environment, and it's very important for you. Your community is very important. Like who you mix with, collaborate with, and that can be projects, but that could be like having kids. Like, you know what I mean? Any way you're going to get into things, your art form and your craft becomes the most important thing to you. And then the community around that becomes very important. But when that starts to go toxic or stale or you've outgrown it, you may need to flee to the shore to regain perspective because you have this resonance to the shore. It's like I'm in survival mode. I can't, something isn't right. You fled for college or university. And then you had that moment, but you couldn't stay there forever. You couldn't stay fleeing in university forever, but it gave you that perspective of like, I need to shake off the spirits of what I was doing there. I'm not feeling the same. And then you would likely have to go back and find your community and build your community again. Does that resonate with you? Did you have to go?
So I literally went and came back, and I've gone and come back since then as well.
Yeah. That'll be a
Yeah.
pattern in your life though. Like there will be times where you need to go retreat and pull back, but you can't, it's not sustainable. You can't live over in that reality, but sometimes we do need to go do that. As the shores person, the opposite is you. Sometimes me too. I'll need to get into the community, get into the art form, but I have to be mindful of having a foot in two worlds. Otherwise but I can't sustain in the kitchen, I need to be walking on the shore, looking at how everybody's doing things in their kitchen rather than getting lost or trapped in a kitchen.
Right.
And something I heard you say when you talked about being very lost, that's the G center. The G center is all about that. And the G center and the ego is really like the stomach area, chest area, and sacral is going a little bit more the reproductive area, just like biologically speaking. And so it's interesting to hear you tell that story and having any kind of belly or abdominal. I was immediately like, she's not in love with that person or space, G center, doesn't know if she belongs there. And then the ego, that's where you can get a lot of stomach issues. I'm being forced to do things or held responsible for things I don't actually want to be doing. And it will just start to erode and it can create nausea. So to hear that kind of coming out in you is like, wow. And then the ability that you recognized on your own, you didn't even need human design, right? Human design is just an awareness tool to help you if you so desire it. But you've trusted your body, started to trust your sacral authority by the sounds of it, doesn't feel good in my stomach, got yourself aligned, came back, clearer vision. I
Mhm.
also want to talk about that for a second. You have double outer vision in your
Yeah,
body. So in your environment sense, you have outer
super strong.
vision, and in your determination. So the breakdown of things and how they work and are put together is very important. So if the breakdown of the life and the arrangement of the relationships doesn't work, it's like, it just doesn't work for me. I don't see myself doing this. It doesn't work for me. And it just needs to be said, appearances will be important. The way it looks will be important. So if this looks bad, I don't want a part of it. That's something that will be like a theme. So let's say you're in a relationship and they start behaving in this way and it looks bad, like even to you as the 1-3, you're like, no, thank you. Like, it will distance yourself from it,
Definitely.
And that's your body's way of keeping you safe. Like, that's your body. That's how your body works. Not everybody's body works that way, but yours does. And I always thought you were such a great example when you were in design, even now with coaching too. It's like the breakdown of how things work, but this website, let's deconstruct it. How are we going to put it together? It was like, oh, perfectly. Now that's mutated as it will. And now your business has shifted and it's more into the entrepreneurial business coaching, which is a natural evolution, even moving into a podcast, natural evolution. So it's neat to see your design play out and to see your depths and what has happened, but it's so rewarding to look back on the experiences and see if you can see it in action there.
Yeah, I love to do both, looking backwards and applying HD
Me too.
principles backwards, but then also seeing how they play out moving forward. It's like that whole
Well, you have
line
the channel,
thing.
you have the channel of logic. So you see patterns. Just as I was seeing patterns with the illness and the design, you will see your own types of patterns. But for
Mhm.
you, it's through the lens of possibility. We could do this, we could do that. I've seen a lot of this pattern, this breakdown.
Yeah.
And it just is the way you perceive reality.
Yeah. For me right now, it's really about emotional patterns in
Oh,
entrepreneurship. That's my current experiment exploration.
well, that was where your wisdom is, right? Your one open center is a solar plexus. So this is someone who's got access to a lot of power. And we feel that when we connect with you. There's a groundedness, you've got a lot of leftness too. So there's this a way of doing things. And even with those
Right.
third tones that you have, ways of doing things, where is the learning? Where is the learning in this life? All about emotions, right? And you have these activations ready to just connect with people. And so you're going to have sometimes emotionally challenging experiences. And also, you're designed to be very calm. So when you get up into other people's emotions, it's like we can either amplify it and, so it's bigger, but we can amplify it so much so it distorts. And then it's like, oh no, I have more learning. I'm sorry, more learning to do. But for you, with so much definition, it's like there's a spotlight on the emotional experience. So I think that makes a lot of sense to be like, I'm a 1-3, I'm in entrepreneurship. What are the emotional patterns in entrepreneurship that we move through? Brilliant. Love that. I think that's a phenomenal example of your design, actually.
Thanks so much. I don't even know what to say. This is supposed to be a profile about you, and you've managed to turn it around a little bit. That mirror aspect coming in again.
Well, I think that is something that the 6th line does. I think that is an example of the 6th line. My learning comes by looking at you and how I understand you. I don't need to talk about myself. I will, and I have. I've been doing it this whole time. But so much of my experience is, let me understand you. What's going on with you? Oh, and I do go on podcasts and I do like to flip it around and put it on them because it's really just showing you what the 6-2 is like. It's really just showing you how that character behaves.
Thanks for embodying 6-2 for us. We will flow now into our closing ritual. We're going to draw an affirmation card for you. I'm holding the 6-2 deck created by Christina from Glow Glow Juice HD. So if you're ready, you and I will take a deep breath in together and then let that go. The card that I've pulled for you today reads, I trust that I will arrive exactly where I need to when I need to. Am I pushing myself to be somewhere I'm not meant to be yet?
Eclipse energy. I know you're like, astrology? What? I'm like, yeah, I needed that. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Where can people connect with you?
If you're looking to connect with me, you can find me at vanesshenry.com. And all my social media handles are the same. Instagram, it's Vaness Henry. YouTube is Vaness Henry Network. And those are the primary places that I really hang out. I do love to share a lot about the home and arranging your home over on Pinterest. And I'm sometimes a little second line on Threads. So you could find me there too. But everywhere it's Vaness Henry.